After talking online about the comedy festival in Saudi Arabia for another few days, I encountered a lot of people asking me, "What do you mean Saudi Arabia is getting better? How are they getting better? What are you talking about?" Now, I'm trying to be understanding. Not everybody is going to pay equal amounts of attention to everything going on in the world, so it's not like you should have known everything I'm about to say. I just want to actually answer the question, because I realize, yeah, some people are just not really aware of what's been going on over there. Saudi Arabia used to be a leading sponsor of what's called Wahhabi Islam. If you don't know anything about Islam and the different types of Islam, suffice to say this was the bad kind. It's a pretty extreme, strict, old-school, traditional interpretation of everything. It was like puritanical Islam. It made problems everywhere. Nobody wanted Wahhabis in their country. Then things started to change in Saudi Arabia, and one of the big things that brought on this change was the rise to power of Mohammed bin Salman, or as he's often called, MBS. Bin Salman just means he's the son of Salman, the current king of the country, descending all the way back to Ibn Saud. It's like the Viking thing where if Paul has a son, his name is Paulson. Mohammed bin Salman is like Mohammed Salmanson. Anyway, even though his father is still alive, this guy has basically been taking the reins, and with that has come a bunch of change. The basic public timeline is that he went to university, then he worked with his father as an advisor in his 20s, then when he was 30 he became the defense minister, then he became crown prince when he was 32, and outright became the prime minister of the country in 2022 at age 37. He is considered the de facto ruler of the country at this point, which is quite interesting. An authoritarian country that was ruled by a king, but now the young prince is taking over. Seems like a time for change. One of the things that MBS did when he came to power was announce that Saudi Arabia was going to tell Wahhabi Islam to fuck off. And it did. They've stopped funding it, they stopped associating with it. When they talk about their own history, they try to downplay the fact that this was ever a thing. This was really good news. Then we see a bunch of other reforms happening in the country. There's been a general opening up of much of the country socially, like lifting bans on theaters and concerts, easing enforcement of religious and social norms by their, what we call religious police. There's been a lot of change on the women's rights front. They loosened the guardianship system for women, they allowed women to drive, they eased up on women's dress code enforcement, they expanded education for girls, they let women into the workforce. There has been a lot of real positive change. But then in 2018, they killed a guy named Khashoggi. The international response to this was very loud and probably not what they were expecting. I imagine by this point it's considered a pretty big misstep by the Saudi government. This guy was a vocal critic of theirs, but could it really have been worth all the cost? It resulted in a lot of lost business, as well as everybody's opinion of the country souring all over again despite the steps they were taking to reform. Think about it, other than Khashoggi, what has the average person heard about Saudi Arabia for the last 10 years? This one event really fucked them over. I think doing business with the West and having cultural interface with the West, like this type of interaction, this is a really positive thing. Authoritarian governments like it when their people are insular. That's why China and North Korea wall themselves off from the West. If their people are sitting around watching our TV and movies, that's kind of good for us, right? That's influence. That's showing their people what life is like outside the regime, making them aware of what life is like elsewhere in the world. It makes them cognizant of what else is possible, of what else could be in their own country. It foments a desire for something different. In some countries, I imagine the ruling class doesn't really care that much about certain traditions, but its people do. The normal people on the streets outside. If your society is really, really traditional, they might rebel if they feel like you're selling them out to the West and pushing a bunch of reform down their throat all at once. It's a safer bet to go slowly. Make sure that you really have your footing. And then over time, as the feelings of your population change, more political change also becomes possible. And the feelings of your population changing is one of the things that can come about through cultural interchange. There's a lot of young guys in Saudi Arabia. They're going to be inheriting the future of this country. What kind of values do you want them to have? Do you want them to just sit around interacting with Saudi stuff, or do you want them to interact with American stuff? If they admire and look up to some American comedians, well, that sounds great. That sounds like if you're against the authoritarianism of the country, that sounds like something you should want. This is the background from which when I heard about the comedy festival, I thought, like putting it in context with all the other changes that have been happening in this country, this doesn't sound that bad. But if you're lacking all of this, if you just think of Saudi Arabia as that shitty authoritarian country over there somewhere, and you don't realize the way that it's been changing over the last decade, well, then I can understand how you would interpret the situation a lot differently. How would I feel about comedians doing a big comedy festival in China, but one of the conditions was you're not allowed to criticize China or criticize the Chinese government? That would suddenly feel very different, to me, I mean. I would feel about that the way that a lot of people probably feel about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. In fact, that comparison is what allows me to relate, I think, to the way that people are feeling about it. And yeah, I think the difference has to do with how I view these two countries pretty different from each other. I view their relationship to the West differently. I view the trajectory that they're both on differently. I don't think that China is like improving and coming around and coming in our direction the way Saudi Arabia is. So like, depending on what kind of stuff you already thought about the world, depending on like what your perception of Saudi Arabia was prior to this happening, you were probably going to end up feeling different things. So I'm just saying that I understand that. And the purpose of this kind of follow-up video is just to tell you more about the things that I have in my mind when I'm evaluating the situation. Oh, and don't expect a transparent democracy in the Middle East anytime soon, by the way. It is probably just going to continue being a monarchy the same way all the other countries in the region are. There's clearly some kind of thematic tension between Islam and democracy. The religion encourages people to support a non-democratic form of governance in the caliph or whatever. But there's a lot of improvement that you can make within the religious monarchy category, because some of these countries are clearly way less bad than others. Imagine if Iran was only as oppressive as Jordan or Morocco. That would be a huge step up, right? Like, those countries are way less bad, even though they're still religious monarchies, technically, right? They're just less oppressive than Iran is.